Well, we've just been round to the pond, catching some insects to see if we can have a closer look at them, haven't we? Yeah, we caught a few. But while we were at the pond, it reminded me of a story. There was a little pond, and at the corner of the pond there were lots of rushes and reeds, and in amongst those rushes and reeds there was a nest, and it was a nest of a duck. And in that nest she had 6 duck eggs, and she was sitting on them and keeping them warm until they hatched out to be little duck chicks. And those were the size of the eggs. It's not very big, is it? Well, one day, while she was sitting there, another egg floated past. And she thought, what's that egg doing in the water? And she gathered it up and struggled and pushed it into her nest. And she felt that she wanted to sit on that one as well, in case it had lost its mum somewhere. And she wanted to hatch it out. Well, she snuggled down onto the nest, but oh gosh, it was a bit uncomfortable because that egg was slightly bigger. Yeah, but she still loved that egg the same as the others. And eventually her own little eggs started to hatch, and the little chicks kept popping out. The little ducklings were all yellow and fluffy, going beep, 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 beep. Mummy, mummy, can we go in the pond? Can we go for a swim? Because ducklings like to go for a swim straight away. And she said, no, you can't. You've got to wait. Well, I want to wait for the other egg to hatch. It's your brother or sister in that egg. Anyway, the little ducklings waited and waited and waited, and eventually the other egg started to hatch, and it cracked and it cracked and it broke open, and out came another duckling. But he didn't look anything like the other ones. He was all scraggledy, and he had a long strange neck and big feet. I know. And the other ducklings all said, beep, 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 mummy, we don't want to go in the pond with that. And she said, don't be so cheeky, that's your brother. And they said, no, he's not, look, he's ugly. And they all jumped in the pond and swam to have a game. Well, the poor other duckling, he didn't know what to do. He looked around and he was all on his own, and eventually he put a foot into the cold water, and then he plopped into it, and he swam after his brothers and sisters. But the brothers and sisters didn't want him. They said, go away, you're ugly, you're ugly. Keep away from us, we don't want to play with you. I know, it's very sad, isn't it? Yeah. So he went to play on his own at another part of the pond. Well, he was swimming along, having a look around, when he passed some frogs, and the frogs were sitting on lily pads enjoying the sunshine. And as he went past, he heard the frogs going, croak, croak. What's that? Oh my goodness, what's that? And the duckling looked round quickly, and the frogs went, we weren't saying anything. And the duckling said, yes, you were. You were making fun of me. And the frog said, well, you've got to admit, you are really, really, oh God, you are so ugly. Croak, croak. Well, the duckling was really upset, and he swam faster and faster and faster until he came to another part of the pond where there was a heron standing in the water. What's a heron? It's a bird with a long neck, long beak and long legs. They stand in the water and wait for a fish to go past, and then they gobble a fish down. Yes, they do like fish, yes. Well, the duckling swam up to the heron and sat near the heron, and the heron looked down with his long neck, and he said, excuse me, do you mind moving from here? Your face is so ugly that you're frightening the fish away, and I won't have any dinner. Well, yes, he was upset again, the poor duckling, the ugly duckling. He swam further on round the pond, and eventually he came to where there was a little water vole, a little fluffy water vole, eating some reed stems with his little teeth. And when he saw the duckling, he went, ugh, you're so horrible, you're so ugly, go away. Well, the duckling was very upset. He climbed out of the pond and he walked across the field where the cows and the sheep were, and he got all muddy and messy and dirty. Eventually he found another pond, and he slipped into that. He looked around. It was nice and quiet. No frogs, no water voles, no heron. Great, he thought. Then he saw some birds flying in. They landed on the pond. Whoosh. They were geese, and they had long necks, and they had a little blob on the top of their beaks. And they came along to him, and he thought, oh no, they're going to make fun of me. But the geese didn't make fun of him. They said, what kind of goose are you? Do you want to join us? And he said, am I a goose? And they said, oh yes, you're a goose. And he said, but I thought I was an ugly duckling. And they said, no, you look like a goose. Honk, 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 honk. Because that's the noise that geese make. Well, the little duckling was very happy. He thought he'd found some new friends. Yeah, he did. He was ever so pleased. And they flew around the pool, and they kept landing near the duckling, and they said eventually, why don't you come with us? But you have to honk, 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 honk. And the little duckling tried to honk. Yeah, but he couldn't. No, he couldn't honk like a goose. So they didn't like him anymore. And they started calling him names. And they put their necks down like that, because that's what geese do when they're angry. And they hissed at him and hissed at him. And one of them pulled a tail feather out. Doink! Well, the little duckling was so upset, ouch, that he ran across the water and flapped his little wings. And eventually, he was up in the sky a bit. And he was flying. And he flew as far away as he could from those horrible geese and those horrible frogs. Eventually he spotted a tiny little pond, and he landed on it. And a tree had fallen over and made like a cave, like a den. And he sneaked into there and he hid in there, and he thought he was safe in there. And he stayed there all winter, hiding in that cave. Nobody saw him because he came out at night when he wanted something to eat. It is sad, yes. And it was all icy and cold, and he stayed there and he was cold and all alone through the winter. When the springtime came and things started to grow again and the sun came out and the cuckoo was calling, he came out and had a look round. And then one morning he saw these huge white birds flying towards the pond. They had massive wings and long necks, orange beaks and big black blobs on the tops of their beaks. They looked magnificent. And he looked up at them and thought, wow, I'd better go and hide. So quickly he went into his little hole underneath the log. The swans, because that's what they were, landed on the pond with their big feet going through the water. They stopped and they shook their feathers, shook their necks and waggled their tails like swans do. Yes, they do. And then one of them looked over and saw the ugly duckling. And he said, oh, good morning. Are you coming out with us? And the ugly duckling said, well, no, I'd better not. I'm an ugly duckling. And the swan said, come on, come and meet the others. So he took the ugly duckling out onto the water, and all the other swans said, oh, good morning, how are you? Oh, what a lovely day. And the duckling couldn't believe it. He saw the swans on the water, and he saw all their reflections in the water, their long white necks and their beautiful white wings. And then he looked down, and he had a shock, because his reflection looked the same as theirs. Yes, he was a swan. That's why he was different to the other ducks. He wasn't a duck or a goose. He was a swan. And he said, am I a swan? And the other swan said, oh, yes, darling, you are a swan. You're a most beautiful swan indeed. Come with us down to the lake where all the other swans are and show yourself off, because you are truly magnificent. He couldn't believe it. He kept looking at his reflection in the water, and he was so happy that he was a swan. So the ugly duckling turned into a beautiful swan in the end. We'd better go and put this water beetle back in the pond, hadn't we? Come on then.